Okay, thanks. Welcome to this edition of VMware Cloud Foundation Live. My name is Rick Walsworth. Joining me today is a veteran on the show, Josh Townsend. Josh, thanks again for joining. And then we actually have two new members joining as well. And I'll let them introduce themselves. Harshad Kolte from the product marketing team, and Andrew Firth, actually based in Australia. So Andrew, I want to thank you very much for waking up at dark 30 to be able to join us here for this live streaming event. But Harshad, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Harshad Kolte. I'm a product marketing manager. We're working on VCF. I joined VMware just 6 months ago in October. So I'm the relative newbie of this team. Something interesting about me, just for the audience, is I'm an avid mixologist. I love my liquors, and that's my hobby. I have a fully loaded bar with my tequilas, my vodkas, every a liquor. And one of the special drinks that I make is called the Flaming Lamborghini. It's a drink with Kahlua. You have put sambuca on top of it, and you light it. And so it's a display type of a liquor. And you light it, and the alcohol when the alcohol is burning, it
Nice.
gives a nice blue flame. You pour the other two liquors in it and drink it with a straw. It's a hit with the guests usually.
All right, so next time we're doing this at Harshad's house and drinks are on him. So that sounds good. Hey, Andrew, how about yourself? One quick introduction.
Yes, hi everyone. My name's Andrew Firth, and I'm a senior solution architect in the Cloud Foundation technical marketing team. A fun fact about myself, well, like many people, I have a lot of interests and hobbies outside of work, and I do struggle to make time for them all. Lately, I've been doing a lot of distance swimming, something I haven't really done much before. So I'm training for my bronze medallion so I can better equip myself in helping out our kids at our local surf club. So that's all about surf awareness and beach safety. So I'm doing well so far, but I still just need to pick up my time a bit. I need to be a bit quicker in the water so I can qualify for it. So yes, that's yeah, and of course, with my work, it keeps me pretty busy at the moment.
That it does. Well, good to hear. And so the swimming, is it kind of ocean swimming, or are you in a pool just doing laps?
Oh, I'm practicing in the pool because it's after hours when I get around to doing it. But I will need to do an ocean swim. So yeah, that's a whole new dimension to things.
So my only tip for the ocean swim is that find a place that's shark infested. If you want to increase your time, that's one way to do it. You have someone chasing you that allows you the ability to be able to do so. So awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. So today we've got a lot to cover today. Obviously there's a lot happening globally, which, obviously is something that's near and dear to all of us. And once you get a platform like this, my ask is that if you have an opportunity to donate to what's happening in Ukraine, please do so. Our company, VMware, has been very forthright about helping to support that. They're matching any donations that are being made. And there's also this joint cyber defense VMware is a part of. It really looks at the global network and the ability to be able to try to tap down those bad characters, those bad actors that are out there, because obviously with everything that's happening in the world, it's to be able to make sure that we have the ability to be able to help out, but then also within your own systems, make sure that you're patching your systems, right? The patching is so important to be able to make sure that you're keeping everything up to date relative to the latest VMSAs. And speaking of that, there were a number of VMSAs that were actually addressed within the Cloud Foundation 4.4 release. So if you haven't seen it yet, there's a number of VMSAs, namely to be able to hit some of the bugs that were out there and some of the issues that were out there from a security standpoint, all addressed within the Cloud Foundation 4.4 GA. The other thing that happened in February when we announced Cloud Foundation 4.4 was the introduction of the support for Nvidia. So this is support that actually came through the integration of vSphere 7U3. And we actually inherited that and then brought that in as a complete solution. A lot of that was discussed last week at the GTC event that NVIDIA held. I don't know if anyone had an opportunity to see that event, but the keynote was over the top. I mean, if you look at some of the capabilities that NVIDIA is bringing forward and some of the things that they're doing with AI, it really is, it's mind blowing in terms of how much, technology innovation is coming out of that. We want to be able to help that and support that through some of the integration that we've done on the NVIDIA side as part of that. And I know, the team's going to talk a little bit more about as we go through that. As a matter of fact, I think that's a great segue for Josh. Josh, I'm going to hand it off to you. Why don't you give everyone an overview in terms of what's in 4.4 and some of the things that people can expect as part of that release? Josh, you're muted. See, after all this time on Zoom, you think you'd get the mute button
You think
down,
I'd
right?
figure it out by now. Nope. I had dogs in the background, and I didn't need everyone else's dogs around the world barking at the same time. So here we go. Yeah, so some cool updates to talk about here, but I don't want to step on the other guys' toes. I know Harshad and Andrew, you guys want to share some nitty-gritty details about what's coming in 4.4. So as Rick mentioned, right, number one is the integration with NVIDIA's enterprise suite for AI workloads. So Andrew, I think you're going to do a bit of a deep dive in there and give us some great info. So I'm not going to spend much time on that. But also coming with it, some flexibility around how Cloud Foundation integrates with the vRealize suite. So in previous releases, we had managed the installation of vRealize entirely with the SDDC Manager and Cloud Builder during the bring-up process, and it made it a very static install. Our customers wanted a lot more flexibility, so in Cloud Foundation 4.4, we're leveraging much more effectively the vRealize Suite Lifecycle Manager to handle those upgrades. And Harshad is going to give us more info on that here in just a little bit. Rick, you talked about the security vulnerabilities and the VMSAs that were addressed. Specifically on that, we had Log4j, right? VMware certainly not the only vendor impacted, and still being impacted across the industry for folks who haven't patched yet. But 4.4 indeed did correct the Log4j issues, as well as some Apache HTTP server vulnerabilities. So good to see there. The other thing that we did is with vSAN, we brought about some improvements to the vSAN data persistence platform, which means that we can now provide more flexible upgrades for customers that are taking advantage of that data persistence platform for object storage, so specifically MinIO and Cloudian.
Awesome, that's great. And with this release, what do you see as some of the kind of next steps that customers should do, both in terms of net greenfield environments, but then also those customers maybe on earlier versions that they want to be able to move to 4.4?
Yeah, so migration and upgrades and patching and everything else, always a challenge, always an interesting process as we get into larger and larger environments. Cloud Foundation strives to make that easier. Right? Instead of piecemealing an infrastructure, Cloud Foundation treats it as a whole. And so when we're looking at upgrading, we're applying upgrades to the entire stack. So to go from Cloud Foundation 3 or even a 4.x to now 4.4, there's a variety of approaches, and it really depends on your originating version number to where you are now. Right? A lot of moving pieces, but we have some great guidance to get you through that to be able to take advantage of the latest and greatest, which of course we advise you to always do, not just for security considerations, but features and functionality are constantly improving. Lots of great new things coming out in our hybrid cloud platform.
Awesome. And then I know there's been a lot of work done around the VCF experience, and I think the ability for customers to be able to get hands-on experience with Cloud Foundation, without requiring a system out there. So can you just explain a little bit more about what's behind the VCF experience?
Yeah. So some great opportunities if you have a home lab or if you have a lab environment in your workplace, to be able to pull down a VCF simulator and run that in your environment in a lightweight footprint, so a nested virtualization experience. You can get the full-blown stand-up VCF and crank through a bunch of different scenarios to see exactly how it works before you make a purchasing decision. If you need a little bit more hand-holding and you're seriously considering Cloud Foundation for your environment, you can reach out to your sales team, and we do have a VCF Experience Day, and they can guide you through more hands-on utilization of Cloud Foundation in that lab environment, really get you hand-holding through a lot of that.
Awesome. And then what about validated solutions? I know they've been making updates across the board on the validated solutions. Anything you want to highlight here?
Yeah, published another blog post today, some updates to validated solutions just released this morning. So a lot of it's just bug fix and minor enhancements and efficiency enhancements. So validated solutions is all about taking a deployed Cloud Foundation environment and making it yours, ready to consume. So tying it into things like your Active Directory for authentication, role-based controls, all that sort of stuff. There's SRM, so you get site recovery management. There's developer-ready infrastructure, all sorts of solutions that sit on top of Cloud Foundation, and they're all driven by infrastructure as code, so custom PowerShell modules to automate all of these day one, day two, day N sort of activities that you would have to do in Cloud Foundation once you operationalize it. And so those processes have become more and more efficient, right? We're able to roll out the solutions on top of your environment. And when I say we, I mean you guys, right? It's customer self-service, being able to roll these things out in a very automated way. So you get value so much faster out of Cloud Foundation once you've deployed it in your environment.
And just if anyone's curious, you can actually download the latest set of VMware validated solutions on the Tech Zone within the VMware Cloud Foundation page. That's great. No, great update, Josh. I really appreciate that. Harshad, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know that there was also a number of vRealize innovations that were brought forward as part of VCF 4.4, namely the ability to be able to integrate with vRealize 8.6. So share a little bit more about that integration and kind of what's new in VCF with respect to vRealize.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rick. Just before jumping on to the what's new, I thought that a little bit of color also on vRealize itself. And I kind of harken back to the times when I started off. In the past life, I used to be an actual developer trying to do the provisioning myself, right? Programming the virtual interfaces, programming the VNix, programming the VLANs. And that was, back then, this is like 15 years ago, I used to always think, wouldn't it be great if there were tool sets which are already in place to automate this, take out all of the manual errors that are that come up, some tool sets, some tools that allow us to do that. And that's where I think vRealize sits well. When we talk about VCF, like Josh mentioned, you mentioned, some of the things we speak about is how it helps IT to make things easier, have that simplified management, take all of the headache or out of IT and developers' hands to make that. That's where vRealize comes in, right? Some of the pillars of the value prop of VCF is built because on top of what you get through vRealize. So that's where vRealize really sits. And even before a little bit of also background on what is inside it, right? The vRealize suite is a suite of components, right? There are multiple things inside it. vRealize itself is a cloud management platform. It gives a lot of options for DevOps teams and developer teams, right? There is lots of technologies out there. Developers want to use the latest tool sets, latest software. They want to incorporate AI into their workloads. They want to do a lot of all of these things, and they want to do it on disparate hardware, in public cloud, private, at the edge, multi-cloud deployments. In order to give IT the confidence that they can do that, vRealize suite has a bunch of components that allow them to do so. I'll just talk briefly on what the components themselves are, and then jump into what's new in those. So the vRealize suite itself is composed of four main components. Workspace one, which is the identity and access management piece of it, helps manage all of the user privileges, admin privileges, to manage the rest of the install and the software. But the other three are vRealize automation, which is VRA, vRealize ops, operations, VR ops, and vRealize or vRealize Log Insights, right? Those three components are building the value prop of vRealize. Little bit about each of them. So VRA, as the name suggests, right? Automation. It's all about automation. I just gave you an example of what I thought was necessary back then. I'm not, 15 years later, this has already come to a different level. What we realize automation gives you is that automation interface, right? Automating every aspect of the lifecycle management piece of it, right? Right from installation to the configuration to patches and upgrades. Josh referred to a little bit of that in the context of VCF, but underlying that for the vRealize suite itself, also this has to be done. So that is what automation gives you, right? Takes the VRA gives you that automation interface on top of which the rest of the functionality is based on. The second piece of it is VROps, right? The vRealize operations, and that is all about, or a lot of it is about optimizing the actual operations of your deployments. It's about continuous performance optimization, making sure that you are making the applications run at the optimum performance that you can get them to, utilizing your capacity efficiently, and the tools which allow you to do that. That VROps allows you to do that. Plus features like predictive analytics using AI. So the combination of that to make sure that the impacts of future failures, you make sure that you take action ahead of time on that. Do application remediation. Do things like automatically balancing workloads in anticipation of a failure, avoiding resource contention. All of these features, the things that enable the suite that enables that is VROps. Wish both of these were available, right? Like, I will give another small example. In that same past life, but several years later, for one of the products that was that we had managing, there were all of these deployments of the virtual machines in the cloud, using up utilization and giving me a bill. We actually got a hefty bill at the end of all of this, and we couldn't figure out what the heck had happened. Some of the
Jeez.
some of the features that they were just workload spinning off from a dev environment and had never been shut off, right? The types of insights that you get from VROps and VRLI can allow you to do that, right? Monitor it and take some preventive action. So that's some of the things that are built into it. The last one, or second last one, is VRLI, right? With all of these different installs, the different hardware configurations, clusters in different places, all of it, the hardware components, the software components, the applications are generating gobs and gobs of logs data, right?
Yep.
There is information there, but it's buried, and something needs to take all that disparate sets of logs, bring it to a central location, and take some real action on it, and preferably in real time. You don't so that you can respond fast to it, or even for some strategic initiatives that you may have, right? You may want to trend reports and all of that.
Yep.
Both of those are enabled through vRealize. So that's the value prop of vRealize. The combination of all of these, VRA, VROps, vRealize, allows you to manage this better, and that's where the value of vRealize suite is. Finally, coming to VRS LCM, which is near where there are new pieces new features inside VCF. VRS LCM, as the name says, is the lifecycle management component of the vRealize suite. Just like we talked about SDTC Manager for VCF, which was doing all of the day 0, day 2 management for the install. That SDTC Manager speaks to VRS LCM which does that job for vRealize suite, making sure that those different components, these 4 applications that I just spoke about, are at the right version. Are they compatible? Making sure that inside vRealize suite it operates in a cloud foundation aware mode. In the cloud foundation aware mode, it speaks to a SDTC manager. Now, like Josh referred to this already when he gave the summary of the feature, right? Prior to 4.4, SDTC manager used to kind of do that handoff, but had to manage all of this itself. It had to maintain that compatibility matrix, what works with what. And if a customer wanted to get any of the features from one of these components of vRealize suite, they had to wait for the next version. Right? If it's not available in 4.3, you got to wait to 4.4. Well, with this new feature, Now VRS LCM and SDDC manager are loosely coupled. So they talk to each other, but there's a handoff. And as far as the mechanics of it, there's a separate application. There's an instance spun off, appliance spun off for VRS LCM, which then takes care of managing all of that interoperability. Now customers don't have to wait for that next feature to come in. That's the one of the cool features inside that. Now the vRealize suite, a customer for vRealize suite can get to it faster without having to wait for it. I think that's what is the main thing, main feature
Yeah.
in the Realize CPU.
Yeah, so let me just put back for a second. So what you're saying is with this new 4.4 release within Cloud Foundation, I no longer am tied to the entire suite.
Correct.
To a specific VCF version. So I can either upgrade, in other words, if I want to go to 8.7, because I did see a comment in the chat about 8.7, they can actually just keep VRS LCM where it is, but now upgrade the rest of the suite to that version without worrying about essentially dependencies between VCF and vRealize.
That's correct. VRS LCM will bubble up what are the available updates that they can make, so they can get to 8.7 without having to wait for VCF update.
Right. So Brian, I think to your question, the 8.7 support there, you should be able to get it within 4.4, directly. So that's awesome. No, great update, Harshad. Anything else?
No, with that, I think that's a good segue for the remaining of the new features in 4.4 with Andrew.
Yeah. So now we get real, right? In terms of Andrew being able to double click and kind of drill down into some of the specifics. Andrew, why don't you just kind of tell a little bit from a technical side, what your engagement was with VCF 4.4?
Yeah, excellent. Thanks very much, Rick, and good job, Harsha, with that vRealize overview. So I just want to kind of spin the conversation back a little bit. So VCF, VMware customers, many of our VMware customers have actually chosen VCF as their single platform, and they're running their production applications, they're running their databases, sometimes VDI, and container workloads on top of it. And they've chosen that because they can run a consistent infrastructure with consistent operations. And, there's some really cool, cloud-like automation that helps it to easily scale and lifecycle manage. So now with the Nvidia GPU support, which we've included now in VCF 4.4, this allows our customers to extend this platform further into the realm of high-performance computing and AI and machine learning. So the benefit to the customer is that they can continue to leverage and use the standardized and inexpensive compute and storage which VCF is built upon, and transform it into high-performance computing simply with the addition of GPU cards. And they can do all of this without having to set up a separate silo of specialized infrastructure to do it. So a lot of people run this on separate hardware or perhaps even run it in the cloud. So now all of their workloads can be managed and lifecycled together in a single platform. And that's a very powerful capability. So when many people think of GPUs, I just want to preface this first, they often think of graphics offload cards. Now, the Nvidia A30 and the A100 cards, they're the specific GPU devices that VCF 4.4 now supports. These are compute-specific offload devices. So they're designed to offload large amounts of CPU and large amounts of memory from a host.
Yep.
So essentially what we've done here, well, Nvidia, together with VMware, have actually virtualized the GPU. And this is a really big deal because virtualizing GPUs allows IT teams to drive greater levels of GPU utilization and also at the same time drive greater economies of scale, which, at the end of the day means, a lot of savings in terms of upfront capital and operational savings. So I'm going to quickly just show a slide. Rick, I'll just get you to pull up that slide. And this will actually help to explain the different ways that we can actually configure GPUs for VMs running within VCF. Okay, that's the slide. Excellent, thank you. So, I just want to preface once again that when I talk about VMs in this conversation, I'm actually talking about traditional standalone VMs, the ones that we know and love and been working with for 15 to 20 years. And also, I'm talking about the containerized workloads and services as well, which also run within Tanzu Kubernetes Grid as TKG worker node VMs. So let's look at our first option here on the left in blue. So if you just click there, Rick, just to make sure everyone's looking, in the right spot. That's good. So what we see here is the typical way that GPU devices have been configured within vSphere for many years now. So that is actually configuring a dedicated GPU, or perhaps in some cases even several dedicated GPUs, directly to the virtual machine as a pass-through device. Now, this type of configuration is, of course, supported with Cloud Foundation, but there are a couple of caveats with this approach, though, and that is that HA, DRS, and vMotion isn't possible. And the reason for that is, pretty straightforward, because the VM is actually pinned to the specific GPU running on the host. Now, if you're using an Nvidia A30 or A100 device with VCF, which we see here on the right in green, no need to click yet, Rick, all of a sudden you have a lot more options available to you. And that's because the alternative to configuring GPU as a pass-through device is to actually configure the device as an Nvidia virtual GPU, or vGPU for short. So we call them vGPUs now. And when configuring a GPU-enabled cluster within VCF, because we work at a cluster level when we talk about GPUs, each host is configured with an identical GPU hardware device. So we need to make sure each host is identical in that regard. And we actually use vSphere Lifecycle Manager. And vSphere, this vSphere Lifecycle Manager image that we use allows us to configure the NVIDIA VIB kernel module driver. So it's specific drivers. And we configure that as a custom component. And we create this image, which is then consistent across all of our hosts in the cluster. And that ensures that, from a consistency and compliance perspective, it's easy to ensure that our hosts are configured in this way. So vSphere Lifecycle Manager actually streamlines this whole imaging process, which is pretty simple and pretty fast and very easy to use. So the NVIDIA driver allows you to then share the GPU and memory from the GPU card between multiple virtual machines. And that's the key thing here, okay? Because we're virtualizing it, we can share it between multiple virtual machines now, rather than just having it pinned to one virtual machine. And as I said, this applies to both traditional VMs as well as TKG worker node VMs, which support conformant upstream Kubernetes workloads. So one of the benefits of configuring an NVIDIA GPU in the GPU mode is that vSphere can use DRS for the initial placement within the cluster. So vSphere will actually work out which host has the right amount of resources, and it will actually place that workload for you. And suspend and resume operations will also work. And when used with traditional virtual machines, vMotion is also supported too. So, once you've configured a device as an NVIDIA vGPU device, which is done through vCenter Server, there are two different ways to configure it. So if, for example, you had a few different VMs on a particular host that needed processing power and memory of a GPU, you have the option of either using time slicing, or you have the option of using what we call, or what NVIDIA call, multi-instance GPU.
Okay, interesting.
Which is called MIG. So time slicing is a great option to choose when you want to share a physical GPU operating in series. So with time sharing, vGPU processing is scheduled. So it's scheduled between different VMs. So shared in series and scheduled are the key bullets here to remember when you're talking about time slicing. And if you want to get into the advanced configuration detail, you can choose to share and schedule resources using best effort, or equal shares, or fixed shares. But that's going a little bit deeper. Now, time slicing is the default mode for the GPU configuration. So if you just want to click once more there, Rick. Oops.
Sorry. I don't know what happened. I'll blame Microsoft. There we go. I'm gonna go back.
Go back.
There you go.
One more click back.
And we're back. All right.
That's it. All right. So yeah, time slicing is the default mode for vGPU configuration. So a single device configured as an Nvidia vGPU can be used to support multiple VMs. So for example, multiple VMs can be configured for one GPU, which is what we see here as the middle option at the bottom, or as another example, next click, Rick. Yeah, time slicing can also be configured to support one VM to one full GPU, or one VM to multiple full GPUs, which is what you can see here on the screen now. Now, multi-instance GPU, so MIG is what we call it, NVIDIA call it, is new to NVIDIA, and it's supported with both the A30 and the A100 cards, which are certified for VCF. If we do one more click, Rick, that's it. MIG.
Again, sorry. There we go.
No, that's it. That's it.
MIG
works differently to time slicing. It allows the NVIDIA vGPU devices to be fractioned into multiple smaller GPU instances. So MIG isolates the internal hardware resources and the internal hardware pathways within the device, and it allows it to operate in parallel. So the outcome here is that you get predictable levels of performance when assigning a vGPU to a VM. So the key difference here is that MIG is fractioned, so that's the other keyword, into smaller GPU instances, as opposed to being shared and scheduled, which is how the other option, time slicing, works. All right, so an NVIDIA A30 device configured with MIG can be fractioned in up to 4 smaller GPU instances. That's the A30. And then the A100 card can be fractioned in up to 7 smaller GPU instances.
Very cool.
I guess the obvious question here, and we haven't seen it yet, but the question will be which, what option would you be best choosing to configure your VMs with? Would you choose time slicing? When would you choose time slicing, or when would you choose MIG, or vice versa? So to answer that question, time slicing is great when resource contention is not a priority. Because it works in series, it is the most economical approach, because you can maximize your GPU by running as many workloads as possible on each device. It's also the option to take it if you want to allocate more than one GPU device to a workload. So it's great if your compute requirements are actually quite large. And MIG, MIG is great and good to use where you want to have dedicated resources and full hardware isolation, where GPU resources operate in parallel. So unlike time slicing, NVIDIA vGPUs configured in MIG mode are not scheduled. So meaning that it is better MIG is actually better suited for higher throughput, lower latency workloads.
Gotcha.
And another added benefit too is that MIG uses security isolation, because memory is not shared across the different slices of those vGPU instances. So I guess regardless of the NVIDIA vGPU option that you'd use, both time slicing and MIG provide options to dynamically scale GPU resources. So scale them when you need them to, which works really well and really quite complements Cloud Foundation really well as a platform that easily scales. So that's just a very quick kind of summary or overview of how NVIDIA GPU devices can be configured in VCF.
Yeah, I love it, Andrew, and I get smarter every time I listen to you talk. So I keep talking. Okay, you get a lot smarter. But what's interesting here though is that I can't just take a GPU and an Nvidia Ampere GPU and run it in a foundation environment. This actually does require a certain amount of integration at the software level as well, using the Nvidia AI Enterprise Suite, because they've actually done the integration on their side to be able to provide this GPU capability. But then it also brings in a lot of the libraries and tools, and I get all of the native kind of tools that gets built into the platform at the same time. So you think about it this way: is that I've now got a platform that can run VMs and containers. And then if I need the ability to accelerate those workloads using GPUs to be able to do so, I'm also now getting, in addition to all the Tanzu tools that I'm getting to be able to manage my container orchestration, I'm also getting a lot of the tools on the data science side through this NVIDIA AI Enterprise Suite, and the ability to be able to, like you say, either time slice or multi-instance these GPUs to get better utilization of these very expensive resources in an environment that's a shared environment. So I can be in a shared developer environment, make it effectively just start to provision directly from VCF and Tanzu, can start to provision these GPUs as part of their resources.
Absolutely. That's
very,
done
very cool.
A VM class when you configure it through VCF with Townsend. But that's another discussion. Cool. There are some great blogs and things online if you want to go into that level of detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So I understand that we also introduced some new capabilities for kind of pushing more out to small configurations, edge locations, robo configurations. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so two-node cluster support is another new feature that we introduced with the VCF 4.4 release. And if you just want to bring up that slide there, Rick, and
yep.
Yeah, fantastic. So this feature is one that over the years we've actually received a lot of requests and inquiries about. And to date, those who are familiar with VCF, the platform has supported the option to configure new workload domains or clusters, not just with vSAN, but also give our customers the options to use NFS, fiber channel, or vVols as principal storage or external storage. So we supported these different storage types for several years now, and when I'm referring to principal storage, I'm actually referring to the storage configured as backing a workload domain or cluster. Now, new to VCF 4.4 is the option to configure two-node workload domains or clusters. That's assuming that we're using NFS, fiber channel, or vVols as principal external storage. So earlier, VCF releases have always required a minimum of 3 nodes. Regardless, so 3 nodes when configuring a cluster, regardless of the storage type used. Well, now with VCF 4.4, you have the option to configure a 2-node workload domain or a 2-node cluster. And there's a lot of value in here. This can be incredibly useful and cost-effective for small deployments, or perhaps even remote deployments or remote clusters that can be configured with VCF. Now, it is, of course, and you'd be remiss of me not to mention this, but it is important to call out that extra care should always be taken when you're configuring, just 2 nodes, and that's to ensure that when you're configuring the 2 nodes, or when you're looking at the hardware that you need for a 2-node cluster, that you size and you accommodate additional GPU and memory capacity, just to ensure that your workloads remain highly available in the event of a failure event. And this is why VMware will always recommend deploying vSAN. So a vSAN cluster of 3 or more nodes where possible.
Right. And
clusters configured with vSAN will allow you to deliver that full software-defined infrastructure stack, because everything else in cloud foundation is software-defined. So here, just the right amount of storage can be provisioned. It can be easily scaled, and it can be managed directly at a per virtual machine level. Okay, and it can be scaled, it can be changed without having to make complex and sometimes disruptive changes to physical storage hardware and physical storage fabrics.
Gotcha. And what I tend to hear in terms of feedback and requests is, obviously the 2-node support, but it really comes 2-node support with vSAN. So that, as you mentioned today, right now, the minimum configuration in a vSAN environment is 3-node. But then the question typically comes back is that, wait a second, I can use a 2-node cluster with a shared witness in a standalone vSAN environment, but not yet supported on Cloud Foundation. So just make sure that's clear that it's not, that 2-node configuration with the shared witness is not yet supported in a Cloud Foundation environment. The other piece of feedback I typically hear is, we have a top-end requirement of 4 nodes, right? So in other words, I can, for a remote cluster that's running out on an edge site, we've had this out now for about 2 years. The other piece of feedback I've heard, and this is actually coming from customers that are using it, is that they want to be able to extend out beyond that 4-node configuration. Again, right now, 4 nodes is max. I know we're looking at the ability to extend that out. We've done that through RPQ for some customer environments, but it's not supported in production environments. So it's something you can also expect to see coming down in the future as well. That's right. Awesome. What else did you have for us there, Andrew? I mean, you're kind of the star of the show here, being the technical expert.
Look, they're the two kind of main key features that VCF 4.4 has. There are a lot of other small tweaks and enhancements that we have with every release, but they're the two main ones that we wanted to talk about. I also just wanted to quickly just talk about where our customers or anyone who's interested in VCF can actually find some really handy resources, and that's by looking at the first place. And you mentioned this before, Rick, is TechZone. So that's core.vmware.com. So TechZone is it's available to everyone to look at. There are a whole heap of videos there, some of them mine, a whole heap of demos there. So there are simulations. So if you choose the Cloud Foundation option within TechZone, you'll probably see around about 50 different demos and videos, which will talk you through all of the different capabilities that VCF has. So that's always my first port of call. Secondly, we have the hands-on labs there too. Hands-on labs enable you to spin up a test environment. You can run through the lab exercises if you like, or you can just choose to just take a bit of a poke around yourself and have a good look and explore how Cloud Foundation works. We also have the VLC that Harshad was also talking about before, and there's also the documentation site. So that's quite thorough and goes into a lot of detail around how to configure VCF in the right way. So I just wanted to end on that. There are some really great handy resources there for everyone to look at.
Excellent. And, I always send people to, our Cloud Foundation page on .com or the blog site, because, we try to use a blog site for not only, announcements and product releases and things that are kind of net new with it, but then also just try to, be from a thought leadership standpoint, new technology directions, try to use that blog as a way to be able to keep our customers, our partners, and, everybody else that follows informed in terms of what's going on. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't, promote our Twitter and LinkedIn page. So I know a lot of you are actually viewing right now from LinkedIn. I see a lot of questions that have come in through the chat on LinkedIn, so appreciate that. I see Josh has been answering some of the questions. So what we do, any questions we can't answer here live, we will actually try to provide a follow-up. Just to be able to make sure that, at a minimum, we're taking that information back to our product management team, because some of these are related to features, which we can't really talk about features in a forum like this, but we do use that as, real inputs that we can provide back to our product management team. So again, thanks again, Andrew. Josh and Harshad for joining us here today. We always try to have a little fun with these and not keep it just about technology. Do try to keep it rather interesting. We're going to try to do this on a regular basis. Again, we can only do this with your engagement. So I do want to thank everybody that's joined us here today. Either on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Periscope, or wherever else you came from. Thanks again for joining. And again, we'll see you in the next VCF Live, hopefully next month. Once again, thanks to the speakers. Thanks to everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time. Be safe.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.